Person of the Week.
World News Saturday. Here's Carol Simpson.
Good evening. With South Africa's segregated parliamentary election set for next Wednesday, anti-Apartheid activists stepped up their campaign of defiance today. There was a major confrontation between protesters and riot police in Cape Town. In addition to 500 arrests, police sprayed the protesters with a purple dye so the ones who got away could be identified and taken into custody later. The story from Richard Sergey in Cape Town.
Hundreds of activists from around Cape Town started gathering early today for the protest march. At the same time, hundreds of riot police were preparing for their arrival in the city center. Despite the massive show of force by authorities, one of the leaders of the demonstration said they were determined to go on.
The real march is towards democracy. The real march is towards freedom.
As activists arrived at the square, police formed a human barricade and declared the demonstration illegal. When the crowd refused to leave and sat down in the street to sing freedom songs, the police water cannon was brought in. State of emergency regulations prevent ABC News from showing the police action, but this was the result. Hundreds of people were arrested, including 52 journalists and foreign TV news crews. Police also opened fire with volleys of tear gas, causing pandemonium as protesters fled the area. Later, more than 1,000 defiant activists, some clearly showing the scars of conflict, crowded into a nearby cathedral for a service led by Archbishop Tutu.
My freedom is inalienable. My freedom is God-given. My freedom is God-given. I don't go around saying, "Boss, please make me free."
Today's confrontation was one of the most serious since the countrywide emergency was imposed 3 years ago. And with just 4 days left until parliamentary elections, in which blacks are excluded, activists say they have no intention of giving up their defiance campaign. Richard Sergey, ABC News, Cape Town.
The Soviet Union saw another massive protest today in Azerbaijan. Thousands of demonstrators threatened to stage a general strike to push their demands for greater freedom from the Kremlin. More from ABC's Jim Laurie.
More than 100,000 turned out, this time on the shores of the Caspian Sea in the Azerbaijani capital. They marched toward the central square, chanting nationalist slogans. Their English signs might be misspelled, but they clearly proclaimed, "Down with dictatorship in Moscow." And what they lacked in English, they made up for in acrobatics in getting their slogans in place. The major issue in this part of the country is serious inter-ethnic warfare between Muslim Azerbaijanis and Christian Armenians. To keep the peace, Moscow has sent thousands of troops to the Armenian enclave called Nagorno-Karabakh. The Azerbaijanis say Karabakh is part of their territory and want Moscow to butt out. Azerbaijani speakers also called for new local elections and recognition of a 9-month-old nationalist organization or Popular Front. The front announced a potentially disruptive one-week general strike to push their demands. The work stoppage could cripple key industries, including economically important oil refineries. The challenge to Mikhail Gorbachev continues. No sooner does one region quiet down than another flares up. And with the general strike due to begin here on Monday, this movement may just be gathering steam. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Baku, Azerbaijan.
An Arab man armed with a Soviet-made rifle shot through the border fence that separates Israel and Jordan today, killing one Israeli soldier and wounding 2 others before he was fatally shot himself. And in the West Bank, Israel too, bloody battles, the horrors of the Holocaust, and eventually the peace that followed. And many years later, a new Europe emerged from the rubble of war. This weekend, the war is being remembered. We have 3 reports from Poland, Germany, and Britain, beginning with Jim Hickey in Warsaw.
Hundreds of people of many religions gathered today at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the former Nazi death camps in Poland. They came to remember the millions of people who were killed here in the war that started 50 years ago this weekend. The Nazis raised killing to a level beyond anything imaginable. Jews especially were targets. But Hitler was also determined, in his words, to kill all people of the Polish race. So he pushed his armies relentlessly. 1 week after the invasion, they reached the outskirts of Warsaw. Poles fought valiantly, but in vain. Today, 66-year-old Eva Zelinska remembers those days when, as a teenager, she fought in the resistance, hiding Jews, planting bombs, anything to defeat the Germans.
We hated them, and it is till now very difficult to...
Eventually, of course, the Nazis were defeated. In 1944, Russian armies began to drive the Germans out of Poland. But all that meant was Soviet domination for the next 40 years. The communist monopoly was broken only 10 days ago when Parliament elected a non-communist prime minister. As Poland undergoes yet another dramatic change, this time controlling its own destiny, it is looking for help from its neighbors, especially, and ironically, Germany. Jim Hickey, ABC News, Warsaw.
This is Hal Walker in Frankfurt, West Germany. It's a get-together of old soldiers, a meeting of veterans, not unlike a session of the veterans of foreign wars anywhere. But this is Germany, and these old soldiers can recall the war only as a lesson in defeat. 50 years ago, they considered themselves liberators, paving the way for the new Germany envisioned in Hitler's Mein Kampf. 6 years later, that dream would crumble into a nightmare of defeat as the Allied armies encircled and captured the Nazis' capital stronghold, and the war ended. The West Germany of 1989 bears little resemblance to the militaristic and aggressive image of 5 decades ago, nor to the pulverized and defeated country of 1945. In a survey this week, only 60% of Germans said they believe that Germany started the war. This is a rebuilt, rugged nation, an industrial leader in the Western Alliance, a strong and willing partner in NATO, and soon to be a center of finance in a united Western Europe. The politics of West Germany today reflect the leftist leanings of reform and revolutionary groups, as well as a resurgent right-wing sentiment which some denounce as neo-Nazi. They form a balance which many believe will keep this nation on a centrist course, content in its affluence and satisfied to be a competitor in peace, not in war. Hal Walker, ABC News, Frankfurt.
This is Pierre Salinger in Winston Churchill's World War II bunker in London. When September 1st rolled around, 50 years ago, Great Britain was preparing for war.
Populations are certainly on the move in this war from eastern and southeastern...
The British planned to evacuate 1,500,000 children and handicapped persons from London was immediately put into effect. Half of them would leave on that day. 2 days later, when the Germans refused to stop their invasion of Poland, the British Parliament forced Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain to declare war on Germany. The same day, he created a war cabinet of 9 men and named Winston Churchill as First Lord of the Admiralty. Churchill would become Prime Minister on May 10th the next year, the day Hitler invaded Western Europe. It was not until the summer of 1940 that Britain would come under heavy air attack from the Germans, and the Battle of Britain would begin. Since the end of World War II, the map of Europe has been irrevocably changed. European countries, including West Germany, are now partners, seeking a single European economy at the end of 1992. While they still look at the communist world with some concern, they are fascinated by the changes going on in the Soviet Union and in Eastern Europe. It is a Europe thinking about the problems of environment, about the lives and health of its citizens, about peace, not war. Pierre Salinger, ABC News, London.
Joining me here in our Washington studios is veteran ABC correspondent Robert Trout, who helped direct live reports from Europe during World War II. His voice became one of the most familiar on wartime radio. Bob, we're delighted to have you with us in person.
Thank you.
Take us back 50 years.